Right, so before we get started with the Porsche 911 Speedster, let's get one thing out of the way, the silly hat. I'm wearing it because we're in Northumberland, it's November, and it's about 4 degrees, which are all perfect places and conditions in which to launch what is possibly Porsche's most hardcore convertible model ever. But that's by the by. I guess there's an argument that if it works here and you can enjoy it in these conditions, we've had rain, wind, snow, you name it, all of them. Well, if it works here, it's going to be a pretty fantastic piece of kit. But before we start talking about the car, because in many ways, talking about the car is sort of irrelevant because there's only 1,948 of them and they're all sold. But we'll get to that and we'll get to what it's like because we need to talk about what it's like to drive because, spoiler alert, it's pretty fantastic. No, what's more kind of interesting with this car is that nostalgia is in the air in the car industry, and so is environmental legislation. We've had cars like the Ferrari F8 Tributo, which kind of they've given a preview to maybe the last generation of pure internal combustion engine cars, and with this car, well, you get a sense this could be the last ever pure naturally aspirated GT Porsche. That's not definite. No one's quite sure whether the next GT3 Porsche 911 is going to be naturally aspirated or turbocharged, but the very fact that it's being talked about and no one's denying it means this could be the last of that breed, that naturally aspirated flat six rear engine GT Porsche. And that's something you need to take a moment to reflect on because, well, there have been cars like this for decades and they're wonderful. So if this is the last one, let's take a moment to savour it. So what have we got? Well, essentially, it's half a Carrera 4S Cabriolet with a GT3 front end. It's got 911R composite front wings and bonnet. It's got a carbon composite roof cover. But like a Speedster, it's chopped down. So we've got this lower windscreen, lower windows, and out back, we've got that engine that could very well be the last naturally aspirated flat six.
And what an engine it is. Essentially, it's the same 4-litre flat six that we've already seen in the 911 GT3. But with a few choice modifications aimed at boosting both power and efficiency. So we've got new higher pressure injectors that increase power by 10 bhp to 503 bhp, and there are new individual throttle bodies that are claimed to deliver even sharper throttle response. And finally, there's that petrol particulate filter.
But even so, and here is the bit that makes you think this could be the last of the line, even so, even in its cleanest form, this thing is putting out 317 grams kilometre of CO2. And I don't think it matters how many Taycans you make or how many plug-in Panameras you make. That's going to be a difficult sell as CO2 emission regulations are screwed down and down and down. Let's enjoy it while we can. It's essentially a Carrera Cup engine for the road. I mean, it's a piece of work. It's a lovely, lovely thing. No other car maker, I think, could get away with making essentially a motorsport-themed engine and sticking it in the back of a road car. Chassis settings, pretty much GT3 with slightly changed damper rate, slightly softer. This is meant to be a road biased car, and even roads that are covered in rain, wet leaves, sleet, and a temperature of about 4 degrees. And the other thing that makes this the pure road driver's option is this 6-speed manual gearbox only. So this is it. This is the pure road car. And well, what do we think? I'm going to tell you, it's just fantastic, it's lovely. Now, I know some people will tell you, oh, you can't have a proper sports car unless it's got a hardtop. And yes, torsional rigidity, I'm sure, is a billionth of a percent better in a coupe GT3, but if you can tell the difference out on the road, you're better than I am, because this thing feels rock solid. And with the roof off, I think there's something to be said, particularly on the road, for open top cars. There's just an extra layer of involvement. You get the smells. Today you got the water splashing on the road under the tyres, little bits of gravel pinging up. You feel more part of the road you're on, the elements. It's a really intoxicating thing, and it's made more so by this car. So this engine, well, petrol particulate filter or not, unlike some of them that sound strangled, this one, oh, it sounds like a cup car. There's that glorious hollow howl that proper flat sixes make. It's a wonderful thing, and no, it doesn't have that savage instant turbocharged punch even of the 992 Carrera S, but there is a beautiful linear throttle response. You get out just as much acceleration as you put in. just as much as you put down the throttle, the car goes. It responds instantly, and it's not punch you in the kidneys pace, it's just fast, just really fast, and you can ring it out in every gear, and it just sounds glorious. It will of course rev to 9,000 RPM. All cars should rev to 9,000 RPM really. It just sounds so good, and you're so much closer to it now. And the petrol particulate filters that may rob some of the soundtrack in closed-top cars, it's not as bad here. You get it bouncing off walls, bouncing off tunnels. It's just a glorious, glorious sound. The gear shift, wonderful, so instinctive. Just, it's mechanical, it's slick, it's precise. You don't even think about it. And as ever with Porsches, all the pedal weights are just so. Oh, it is one of the great drivetrains. It's lovely. Here we go. Listen to that! What a thing! What a thing! No, it's not the fastest. A Ferrari F8 Tributo, a 600 LT would rinse it in a straight line, but there's more to going massively fast, particularly on a day like today. What you need on a day like today is a chassis you can trust, and the 911 has that. As we said before, it's essentially GT3, so we've got the steered rear axle, we've got, yes, slightly softer damper rates on it. Now today it's on Dunlop SP Maxes, not Cup 2s, which frankly is a very good thing. I mean, it doesn't really much like standing water as it is, but there is something there. Thankfully with the rear engine you do get good traction, but it's just such a joy to drive. Now these conditions are pretty horrible, and we're not pressing on because to do so would be suicidal. But there's so much information here. The steering, the new 992, you don't notice how some of the information has been taken away. It's only when you step back in a car like this that you just realise there's a bit more chatter, and it lets you know what's going on. You get it through the seat of your pants, even though these conditions are pretty hair-raising, or at least they would be if I had any under this hat. You can just feel the grip ebb and flow. You can trust the car coming through corners. You just know exactly where you are, and with that rear-engined weight distribution you can get on the throttle much earlier than you can in mid-engine cars. And the electronics, my word, they're a bit special. They give you just enough leeway to have fun, but then at the same time they gather it up, which on a day like today is a very good thing. Porsche carbon ceramic brakes are standard on this, and they work an absolute treat. There are a few braking setups that are as feelsome and powerful and progressive as these, and on roads like these glorious Pennine roads you can just, even in these conditions, standing water aside, you can lean on the brakes, and then lovely heel and toe downshift with that glorious gearbox. It will auto blip if you want, and it's a really good system, but when you're in a car like this you need to break out the heel and toe technique, rusty as it is in the days of DCT and 8-speed ZF autos. This thing is just pure driving at its best. Now, as we said earlier, there is a problem here, obviously. There's the price, £211,000, and as a learned colleague pointed out to me, you could have one, if you could find a GT3 Touring, you could have one and a Boxster Spider for the same price, and that's something to think about. And then there's the thornier issue of the fact you can't actually buy one at the moment. They've all gone, all 1,948 of them. Snapped up by people who want to have what could be the greatest road 911 there has been for a while. And you can see why. It's a very different car to the original Speedsters. The original 1954 Speedster, which was pared back, stripped out. It was a more affordable driver's car. This is probably the most expensive one there is, and it's sophisticated and it's full of carbon fibre and titanium this and unobtainium that. It's not a pared back sports car, but God, it's a glorious one. But what it is, and what we need to think of it as, maybe, is the last of the line. The last of, despite its numerous electronics, the last of the truly analog Porsche 911s, naturally aspirated manual. The next GT3, turbocharged or not, will be a fantastic piece of kit, I have no doubt. But you can't help thinking it won't be quite the same car as this. It'll be faster, it'll be probably more precise, it'll certainly be more efficient and more in line with various regulations, but it won't be quite the analog, enriching driving machine this is. I mean, as I've said earlier, it's 4 degrees, it's raining, I've got the roof down, but I don't care. because it just adds another layer of involvement. It gets you closer to that naturally aspirated flat six. This is the total immersion sports car, and yet it's got a heater, it's got sat-nav, it does all those things. You could say a Caterham does that as well, but a Caterham is very hardcore. This is hardcore, but it's usable. It's all the 911, and so it should be at £211,000. It's all the 911 you could want if you could buy it. But let's not dwell on that. Let's just dwell on the fact that this 911 Speedster, it's just a glorious thing. I mean, there are moments today where I would have quite liked a 15-year-old Subaru Forester on winter tyres, but by the by, I don't think there is any other super sports car that I would want to drive in these conditions, roof on or off. That's the thing with grip and sliding and moving around and treacherous conditions. If you trust the car, if you trust every message that's coming through to you, it doesn't feel intimidating. If I was in a McLaren 600 LT today, AMG GT, I wouldn't be having as much fun. I'd be panicking more than I'd be smiling. And in this thing, I spend more time smiling than anything else. If this really is the end, then, oh, it's a glorious way to go.
We still don't quite know what engine's going to power the next generation of 911 GT3, and with every passing day, it seems more likely that it could be naturally aspirated. But even if it is, well, it's going to have to be a pretty special car indeed to beat this glorious, wonderful, soulful 911 Speedster. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, we also do news, reviews, motor shows, off-roading, you name it, then don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button and turn on post notifications so that you never miss out on another Autocar video.